Hey everybody, I just wanted to do a quick video on the skill gem damage scaling in Path of Exile 2. I haven't heard a lot of people talking about this, but to me it's very interesting. I think it might work maybe similar to the Path of Exile 1 spell gem level scaling, but because I mostly played melee in Path of Exile 1, I didn't really understand this until now. But going into Path of Exile 2, it affects everybody. So I just want to quickly go over it. I feel like a lot of people are getting it wrong, and this could help a lot of players increase their damage substantially. Maybe throughout the campaign, but definitely going into maps and finishing off like endgame content. To start, let's take a look at mace skills. I primarily play warrior, so that's just what I decided to start out with. And I'm just going to do a simple explanation of how the damage scales up from level 1 to level 40. Going from level 1 to level 10 is basically 2x damage. Going from 10 to 20, same thing, 2x. 20 to 30, 2x. And 30 to 40 is 2x. So why does this matter? What this actually shows is that skill gem level scaling doesn't actually get worse. There's no diminishing returns. In fact, it actually gets better the more you have. And I think it's one of the only stats in Path of Exile that actually does that, outside of obviously support gems, right? So it's essentially allowing you to take support gem level damage scaling and putting it on your gear. So if you're going through Path of Exile 2 right now and you don't have plus levels to your primary attack's skill gem, you're likely playing the game wrong, at least in maps and in endgame content. What I want to talk about next is what I feel like GGG is going for in terms of when they think you should be getting these stats and how strong they are. When you hit maps, it kind of feels like GGG wants you to work towards plus 10 levels pretty easily. So for mace skills, on weapons you can get plus 6 relatively easily. Let's do plus 5 for now. On gloves you can get plus 2. And on an amulet you can get plus 3. All of these things aren't really like chase level rare items, right? They're just like really good mods on pieces of gear. They'll cost maybe a divine plus early in the league, and then eventually they should kind of die down. But getting to 10 is pretty easy. So going from level 20 to level 30, I think most PoE 2 players will get to. Going from 30 to 40 seems much harder and seems to be their stretch goal. I haven't even looked into necessarily how to do it on certain skills. Like I don't know if the skill that I'm using right now, Rolling Slam, can get there. There are specific items that allow you to do it, like Prism of Belief, which gives you plus 3 level of all whatever skill it happens to roll with. These are going to be incredibly expensive, especially on meta skills. There's also the idea for melee to be able to dual wield, so technically I could be using 2 of these. The weapon slot goes up to plus 7, so you could get plus 14 from your dual wield setup, another 5 from gear, and then Prism of Belief could put you even over 40. I don't think there's any damage scaling over 40, but just to kind of explain how you might get from 30 to 40, it's going to be a lot of work. When it comes to warrior, dual wielding here means you can't block, so you're instantly going to die in the end game. But in general, you can think about it like that, right? Strive for plus 10 levels when you hit maps, and really if you're trying to min-max, you can go from 30 to 40 for somehow another plus 10. So I made this chart, kind of detailed stuff. I did it because I was sick of using Perfect Strike. The chart does show that Perfect Strike scaling is insane. The damage top end is some of the highest in the game, but I hated it. I was doing a lot of just kind of sitting around. A lot of the endgame bosses move around, so even just waiting to hit it was pissing me off. So I wanted to look at alternatives, and what I ended up realizing was Rolling Slam, specifically the second slam. So this says Rolling Slam 3, it's just how I parse the data. Rolling Slam is basically there at this point. So I got interested in looking at that skill. There's certain support gems right now that are completely busted too for Rolling Slam, so I might end up actually doing a builds video later. But anyways, just looking at this chart, it made me realize I feel like GGG kind of splits up the skills right now in terms of like the top end. What is the most damage you could possibly be doing on these classes right now? And when that would matter is for like endgame bossing. So you've got a few different abilities that line up there. One is Perfect Strike for maces. One is Shield Charge. One is Hammer of the Gods, obviously. Another is Rolling Slam. Then you have Sunder. And this final one is Bone Shatter, but it's the explosion of Bone Shatter, which only gets triggered if you heavy stun. So this is not something you could use consistently. So these, I would say, are S tier abilities for killing bosses right now in PoE 2. When we look at the second tier, it's going to be something like a Leap Slam, which is a movement skill. It's going to be Earth Shatter, but this is probably Earth Shatter to me is the most likely outlier, in that it probably can do way more damage than this chart is showing, just based on the explosion being able to shotgun, I think, when you have one of the support skill gems that makes it split, and you can kind of like stack them up and then blow them all up at once. So like Earth Shatter isn't being done justice. It probably could be like a tier 1 skill at the top, S tier, whatever. Magma Barrier, the first hit of Rolling Slam, which the fact that it's this high is kind of insane. So you're doubling up on Rolling Slam. Earthquake, Sunder, which if we pull up, let me pull up Sunder too. I was surprised to learn that Sunder had a few different. So that's Sunder Shockwave would be my guess, as opposed to the actual ability scaling. Stampede is down here, so like the more movement-based skills, Leap Slam, Sunder, like it makes sense that they're not necessarily boss killing abilities. You could probably still boss kill with Leap Slam, etc. Anyways, one thing I want to point out is Mace Strike is way down here. And something that I actually tried to do in 0.1 was make Mace Strike like the most generic possible ability that I could use across all content in the game. And then I hit a wall towards the end game when we're talking about bossing difficulty like 3, 4, or 5. The health scaling just kind of gets out of control, or the damage reduction, whichever way they scale it. Like Mace Strike, even at level 40, would be nowhere near enough. Separate from what can kill bosses, though, which matters way more to you guys, is what can just clear maps. And I feel like even as low as Mace Strike is here, can kill rares. So essentially, like all of this, and maybe every single ability in the game, like Earthbreaker or Armor Breaker or whatever, which is just supposed to be used to break armor, you could probably clear map content with it. Volcanic Fissure, there's probably some scaling here that's not getting included. But just overall, like, you don't need to be doing this amount of damage, like the S tier amount of damage, in order to clear maps. I've been using Stampede, which everybody knows about already. Like, you can just, the combos with Stampede, you can just run around maps and blow everything up. Gonna hop over to another graph. And the graph, this one shows the actual change in slope of the first one. So this is the first derivative of the graph that we just showed off. But all it means to you guys is basically, it shows how the damage changes from level 1 to level 10, 10 to 20, 20 to 30, etc. And what you can see is it kind of lines up with the other graph. Why I'm showing this one off is because of Hammer of the Gods here. Every single skill works in the way, like, as the same as all the other ones. Hammer of the Gods is the outlier. And it does this weird thing where it doesn't really scale at all. It just kind of cuts straight through the graph. And it kind of got messed up from 0.1. Let me grab the actual 0.1 values. So this is Hammer of the Gods from 0.1. Massive outlier, just insane. I don't know how this got through. Makes no sense to me. Ending up with what we have here, which is just showing that the scaling on it scales slower than other abilities, and that makes sense because of how much damage it does, you know, right off the bat at level 10. It's a crazy amount of damage. There's no downside. You just tap it, blow it up. Perfect Strike does a great amount of damage, but you have to sit there and hold it for a bunch of time. Rolling Slam, Shield Charge, all these have drawbacks. Hammer of the Gods, you just kind of toss it out there. So definitely needed a nerf, but I don't know how it got through in the first place with the other the scaling. Like this just should have never gone live. I don't know. I don't know if they were just like, fuck it, let's just roll with it. Seems like fun, but just crazy. Anyways, that's gonna do it for me. I did set this up for spear abilities. I was kind of curious just to see if there was anything interesting there. Elemental Sundering seems to be incredibly strong, but I feel like there's some drawbacks in that it consumes charges. What is this guy? Spirit of Solaris, which is essentially, again, I haven't played any Huntress yet, but that kind of looked like the Hammer of the Gods for that class. A lot of these skills are going to be dependent on how the actual skill works, right? How much time does it take to charge? Does it consume charges? Does it rely on heavy stuns? All this kind of shit. So once you know, like, don't take this chart as like end all be all for damage scaling. But the video overall, what I wanted to hammer home is that plus gem levels is a priority in Path of Exile 2. It's way more similar to Diablo 2, right? So going back to Diablo 2 and more likely how they did skill gem scaling, spell skill gem scaling in PoE1. It's just incredibly important, right? It's one of the highest damage increases you can get, and it doesn't have diminishing returns. It's always the same amount of more damage per skill level in most cases, and what that means is that it's just going to continue to get better. It's just more damage, right? Whereas most stats on gear that you can get is going to be increased damage in some way, right? Anyways, hope that made sense. Like, subscribe, whatever. If I do a build video, it's going to be on Rolling Slam. I think it's actually one of the strongest boss killers in the game right now, at least for Warrior. You could probably do better with some kind of Ignite, Perfect Strike kind of bullshit, but I was sick of it. And yeah, I will catch you guys in the next one.